afternoon and welcome to the very first edition of Talking Points. We will be online every Wednesday at 1 o'clock talking about a myriad of topics relating to investment opportunities, property ownership, trusts, precious metals, and the list goes on. So if any of you have ever attended the Wealth Masters seminar or webinar before, you will have heard about what we're talking about today. And if not, I will share all the details with you a little later of how you can ensure that you're at the next Wealth Masters webinar to ensure that you see the light with investments. Our aim is to open a platform here for you to ask questions, to interact, share opinions, and expand your knowledge on the specific subject every week. So please feel free to ask your questions in the chat box, and we'll get to as many of those as possible. This show, don't forget, is for you, and we want to make sure that you get the most out of it. Now, before I begin, I must advise that we are at the mercy of our internet data and Wi-Fi, and of course, Murphy's Law. We had a little bit of a glitch in the beginning, but we are back and we are live with you now. And if we do disappear for whatever reason out of our control, please just hang in there. We will be back as soon as possible. And now for all of the introductions. My name is Damian Anderson, and usually you're either blessed with a pretty face or a brilliant brain. Now, unfortunately, I lack both of those. So each week, what I'm going to do is invite an industry expert with a hell of a brain, and they're going to share their expertise and knowledge in the field. And I promise you, some of them have very pretty faces as well. Now, without any further delay, this week, we're going to be talking about Section 12J investments. So some of you may have heard about it or seen it in financial news and publications, but you may not have grasped the entire concept about it. So we aim to try and make you understand the concept in the next few minutes. Our expert today is Johannes Maree, who is the CEO of Destinata Capital, a registered FSP and listed 12J company. Johannes obtained his degree in accounting from Stellenbosch and then subsequently got his honours degree from the University of South Africa. Johannes spent 2 years in the UK before returning home to the beautiful and warm South Africa after completing his articles. Johannes joined Destinata in 2015 as the CFO, and in 2017 he took on the role of CEO, and he has been blazing trails in the industry ever since then. Now, from a master of the boardroom to the master of the briar room, please help me welcome Johannes.
Hi, Damien. Yeah, thank you for that flattering introduction. I appreciate it.
Fantastic. Thanks, Johannes, and thanks for joining us. Now, before we begin, I've got a very important question. The boardroom or the briar room? Where do you think you get your best and brightest ideas?
Damien, easy answer, definitely the briar room. I think all the good ideas come when you're relaxed, and sometimes having a beer or a good whiskey also helps it along a bit.
A little bit of liquid lubrication to keep the brain going. That's what we like.
There we go.
Now, Johannes, for those who may not know, can you please tell us in a nutshell what is a 12J investment?
Okay, so Damien, in a nutshell, it's a tax incentive that's been brought about by SARS and Treasury to incentivize the South African taxpayers to invest back into the South African economy. And the way that it's done is they offer us 100% tax deduction on the amount invested. So we can essentially reduce our taxable income quite significantly. I think the best way to explain it is through a very basic example. I'm going to use two taxpayers that are essentially pre-investment in the same position. Taxpayer A falls in the 45%, which is the maximum tax bracket for individuals, sitting on R1 million taxable income, and we've got taxpayer B in the same position. Taxpayer A goes and makes an investment into a traditional non-tax deductible type investment, say something like a call account or listed shares or whatever it may be. Those shares cost him R1 million. He still has to pay 45% on his taxable income, so 450,000 Rand goes to the taxman, and that's the position that he's in. If I then look at taxpayer B chooses to make a Section 12J investment. Now that investment is 100% tax deductible. So if he invests R1 million into that, it reduces his taxable income from 1 million to 0. So essentially, he doesn't have to pay the 450,000 Rand in tax that he otherwise would have paid. If he was a salary earner that earned during the year and paid his pay-as-you-earn during the year, it would mean that SARS would have to pay him back the pay-as-you-earn that he paid throughout the year. If he's a provisional taxpayer, he would just claim that deduction straight up when he does his provisional tax payment and just not pay the 450,000 Rand. Damon, I think one thing that's just very important that I also want to point out to everybody that's tuning in, the points that I'm giving today and the viewpoints that I'm giving should please not be construed as financial or investment advice. It's up to each prospective investor to speak to their preferred advisors and to do their own homework. So I'm giving my opinion and what I've experienced in my experience thus far in the industry.
Fantastic. I think it's true what you say. Homework is so important for everybody.
Yep.
I think this is a great opportunity as well. Speaking of homework, that who's ever tuning in, they can ask their questions, and then we can chat live and give you that sort of feedback as we go. But speaking of the people who are investing, who are the people who could benefit from investing in a 12J investment?
Okay, so essentially, it's any investor that has an appetite for the same type of asset classes that we have appetite for, but even more so, as I think showed by the example that I just did, even more so taxpayers who are looking to reduce their taxable income, who are essentially looking for SARS to subsidize their investment portfolio. Again, if I go back to that example, the investor that put 100 million Rand into a call account, that investment cost him R1 million cash out of pocket. The 12J investor, he got his R1 million asset, the shares in the 12J, but he was subsidized essentially 45% by SARS. So that investment only cost him 550,000 Rand. So it's a massive impact, and that's your first major spin-off. But then obviously, secondly, investors who have got the same type of appetite as us. I think down the line in the interview, we'll expand a little bit on what type of asset classes we focus on.
Sure. And then, Johannes, I don't know if everyone else is having the same challenge I have, but every single day I'm getting calls from different telemarketers and different companies, saying, this is the product we have, and trying to, get you to invest. What differentiates a 12J investment from a standard investment that you'll get off the shelf, if we call it that?
Okay. Your standard investment is obviously linked to the risk and reward of that industry or that type of investment, whatever it is. In the case of, so what I'm saying actually in a nutshell is, nothing is guaranteed in investments. There's always risk involved. One thing that's quite nice about the Section 12J industry is that tax benefit that you get, that's legislative. That's not linked to any performance of the fund, etc. It's literally, if this is your tax position pre, you can go and do the sum. This is the benefit that I'll get off the deduction, and that's legislated. SARS has to pay you back that money if you did the investment properly. So I think that's a major benefit. And I think that the other benefit, but again, that's up to each investor's appetite is, I quite like the asset classes that we go for. We go quite heavily into hotel type apartments. We go into asset classes that we view as essential to human behavior and human life. One of those things who traditionally was probably not seen as a must-have is security. We have an asset that's linked to the security industry, and I have to say that has performed very well. But the big thing that I want to stress is that upfront guaranteed return that you get from SARS is the major difference between 12J and anything else out there.
Of course. And then, Johannes, you mentioned, that you need to have a sort of a trust in place of knowing that where you're investing, that the company is going to be doing the right thing. So why would you say Destinata is the right or a better option, in terms of how long have they been around, and what sort of fields are you guys operating in as Destinata?
Okay, so we've been around not that long. We've been around since about middle 2017. We incorporated the company. We did our first cap raise in February 2018. But thus far, we've had a decent track record with regards to our dividends that we paid out to our investors. We've had a decent track record on the deals that we've made and the deals that we put together. And I believe we've got a very nice package of investments sitting under the fund at the moment. I think to elaborate on that, as I mentioned, we focus quite heavily on hotel properties. We do security. We also do renewable energy. We invested there in a company that does solar panels. Basically works on an asset rental model. We keep ownership of the equipment and the operational company leases it from us. Then we are involved in another asset rental company that deals with office automation, printers and VoIP telephones and that type of thing. Again, the risk versus reward there, in my opinion, is very good. We get fairly high returns on those, where I don't view them as investments that are too high risk, especially on the office automation, seeing that it's made up of a lot of smaller deals that is spread across many clients. If there is a client that struggles to pay, those assets can be collected and deployed to another client. So that's quite a benefit to me. Obviously, the major thing, I think, and as you know, Destinata is all about property. I think the major benefit that the hotel apartments especially give us is the fact that we can, number one, have more security. I mean, property, and we focus on Cape Town. I mean, Cape Town is a very small place, and if you just look at the fundamentals of property, it's very expensive for developers to build new stock in Cape Town. So there's only so much space in Cape Town, and for us to have a piece of that, I think is very good. And secondly, we can increase the return on investment on those assets due to the fact that we can use a portion own capital and then leverage it off bank finance as well. I mean, to use an example, if I buy a house for 100 Rand and I obtained a yield of 10 Rand, I made a 10% return for the year. If I only put in 50 Rand and I made a yield of 10 Rand, that's a much larger yield. That's a 20%. Okay, then the interest still comes off, but it's still, it's still a much better yield. So that's why I like our specific approach to it.
Fantastic. And then Johannes, say now I'm an investor, or there's an investor that's listening, they're interested to get involved. What sort of commitment period is there for the 12J investment, the whole period that they need to be involved?
Okay, so, and this is again a legislative thing as well, but your minimum period is 5 years. If you extract your funds prior to the 5 years, then there's a recoupment from SARS, and what that means is you are essentially taxed back on that benefit that you obtained upfront. If you wait your 5 years, then that recoupment is not applicable.
Okay, so there is still a bit of an exit strategy if somebody is involved for that 5-year period, as you say.
Mm-hmm.
And then tell me, we had a question that came in that says, once you have invested, are you able to sell your shares within that 5-year period?
If you sell your shares, that recoupment will unfortunately also kick in. So no, I think before you get involved in a Section 12J investment, it's important to have a minimum 5-year investment horizon on it. I don't think if you have a shorter look, things obviously happen. It can happen that somebody is requiring cash on the short term, but then obviously from our side, the way we would look at it would be important to look at the liquidity within the fund, because I wouldn't want to prejudice other shareholders by potentially liquidizing assets quicker than we would want to, as an example. So that'll be dependent on the liquidity in the fund if somebody wants to exit in that way. But it is a possibility. It's not completely excluded.
Okay, fantastic. And then can you talk to us a little bit about the standard investment amounts? If someone is interested, what are the numbers they need to be looking at over that 5-year period?
Okay, so typically, and the main thing that happens in the 12J sector is that the minimum required is a R1 million investment. Now, something that we do slightly differently is we've incorporated Destinata Capital as a public company. That allows us to issue prospectuses from time to time. The prospectus goes through a review process with the CIPC, and once they approved it, we can make it live and we can issue it. Now, during these prospectus windows, that minimum requirement of R1 million as required by the Companies Act is removed. So we take investments of down to R100,000 during those periods.
That sounds amazing. And how often do these investment periods come up through the prospectus with Destinata?
We do it twice a year. We normally try and do it so that it coincides with the important tax periods. Provisional one is now at the end of August, so we've got one open at the moment, and a prospectus window that's going to close on the 31st of August. And then our next one is planned to run again from November to February 2021.
Fantastic. I think a lot of people will keep their eyes out for that. And Johannes, you mentioned now the minimum of R100,000 as a capital investment. Are there options for if there's a young, eager investor who wants to sink their teeth into investments and get involved, and they're liking what you're saying and everything about Destinata? Are there options for these guys to also get involved that may not have the R100,000 capital readily available?
Yeah, we are running a let's call it a special program for this. It's a limited opportunity. We call it the 12J community. So what the offering is there is that we're giving, and again, this is very limited, we're giving a limited number of investors the opportunity to invest at R500 a month. So where we're at in the process of that at the moment, we are essentially filling up our, let's call it a waiting list. We've got a minimum target that we want to hit for the waiting list. And what will happen then is a specific prospectus for those investors will be registered and issued, and they will then subscribe for those shares. And there the commitment is R500 a month for the 5 years, every month on debit order. But obviously that opens it up to a much wider field.
Sure. So basically what you're saying is if I stopped having a cup of coffee a day over a month period, I could essentially become an investor in the 12J fund through Destinata.
Correct. And then the taxman can pay for your coffee after that.
That's what I like to hear. Let's get something back for a change.
Absolutely.
Tell me, Johannes, speaking of getting back, once the share or the investor gets their dividends back, are they able to then reinvest that into another 12J, or does that money go back to them? Is it up to them how they use that?
It's the investor's choice. Every cycle when we pay dividends, we give our shareholders a choice whether they want the cash or whether they want to reinvest. You can reinvest, and obviously the double benefit there, if you do reinvest it, is that you again get a tax deduction on that reinvested dividend. So it's essentially already the casino's money that you're putting back in that you're getting the additional tax deduction on. So it can extrapolate your return quite nicely.
Amazing. And Johannes, we've spoken quite a bit now about, the periods investing, the numbers we need to look at for investments. So have you got any sort of ballpark figures or some sort of results of the last years that you could use just to entice, potential investors who may be interested in 12J, who just need that little bit of an extra hook to get them to get in touch?
Yeah. So look, obviously I it'll be unfair to make promises about the future, but what I'm very happy to talk about is what we've done in the past. So if I look at the last financial year, which is the 2020 financial year, during the year we declared dividends of 10%. So if I put that into perspective, if I, as the investor, after all the tax breaks and after all fees and after all taxes, etc., that 10% return translates to about a 15% after tax return. So I mean, if you had to compare that, let's call it, if you had to compare that to an interest rate type of return, something that would have been taxable. Let me do a quick calculation here. Yeah, that would relate to 27% pre-tax, which is not something you're going to get too often out there.
That sounds insanely good. We spoke earlier a little bit about the core sectors that Destinata utilizes for their funds, and you mentioned there was the hospitality field, the renewable energy, and security. And I think it's quite smart the way you've done it, because those are all three very separate entities that all work very well together. If you think about it holistically, with the accommodation that you're staying, it requires a really good security force. And at the same time, the renewable energy, because we live in South Africa, it's one of those things that's needed. So I think it's a very smart way that has been done. But now looking at where we are in the economy in South Africa, and Cape Town in particular, how risky do you feel the hospitality sector is here? Just in general, and specifically now with the period we've gone through with COVID-19, do you feel that there's going to be a kick again? Do you feel like we're going to be suffering from this for a while? What are your thoughts on that?
Okay. Look, obviously the last few months have been slow on that, because hotel keeping was essentially outlawed now for a while. No, we've already started to see an uptick on the bookings again. In my view, I think we're going to have quite a good summer. I think the first good thing is that COVID happened in the winter months, which are, traditionally your slower months in any case. And I think a couple of let's call it macroeconomic factors have actually now kicked in, which makes me quite excited for the future. I think the first thing that has happened is a lot of the Airbnb hosts in especially Cape Town has taken their units off of the hospitality market and started to put long-term tenants into the units again. And what that means is it's taken a lot of the supply out of the market. Now, with travel starting to return, I mean, it's economics 101, demand and supply. We might now be on about, say, 50% supply versus what it normally was. So we only need 50% demand to be back at the same levels, essentially where we were at. Another thing is there's always going to be the requirement for business travel. And I think there we are actually quite well positioned, because we've focused largely on a development in the Waterkant. It's fairly new and it's quite an upmarket building. It's called the Docklands. So that caters very nicely for executives. The good thing is you're a 2-minute Uber drive out of town, but you are out of town, so you're out of the noise, you're out of the busy streets, you're in a nicer setting, it's quiet, you can, there's obviously super fast internet and all those things in place. So number one, I believe tourism will come back, but number two, even if it doesn't, I think especially those units are quite well placed. As I said, I think we've already started to see the proof that the human race is quite resilient. We've started to see an uptick in the bookings already. And yeah, I mean, I personally, with the removal of so much stock from the market, with the demand starting to come back, I think the long term that actually puts the guys that remained in the market in a good position.
Absolutely. And I think there's a lot of people, myself included, who had overseas trips planned. And We're all sitting and talking now and saying, well, we had that time booked. We had our leave. We don't want to sit at home now and do nothing. And they've opened into the provincial traveling. So I think there's going to be a lot of people, migrating down to Cape Town from October months to December over the festive period, because, if they can't go overseas, naturally the next best thing to go is to Cape Town. And, I can't blame them. It's one of the most beautiful places ever. So I think in that sense as well, talking to what you said about the resources are a lot less, but I think the demand will be a lot higher. So that puts them then in a very good stead.
No, absolutely. I agree with you.
We also spoke quite a bit about the South African context and, as a South African who wants to invest, what happens if, we're presenting globally at the moment, and the webinars we're going to do, they're also going to be global. If someone is living overseas, but this really strikes a chord with them, are overseas investors allowed to invest into 12J, or do they need to be a tax-paying citizen here to take advantage?
Okay. They can invest, but obviously the tax deduction is only deductible against South African taxable income. So if they don't have taxable income in South Africa, they're not going to get the tax benefit. But I mean, they still get all the other rights and privileges that go with being a shareholder. So I mean, you still get your share of the capital value of the company and your right to dividends and so on.
Okay, fantastic. Now, I mean, I think you've given us a lot of great information, and I'm sure there's a lot of people who are very interested in this whole process now. What would be the process that they now need to follow to become an investor with Destinata? Are there forms to be filled out? Is there an online platform that they can do all of this? How does that work? And for them to get more info?
Okay, yeah, the easiest way, I think we've got quite a nice online platform for that, is just to visit www.destinatacapital.com, all one word. There's a specific section on the website that deals with our prospectuses. So the current one that's open is Prospectus 2 of 2020. They can just go and click on that button, and the steps are laid out in very simple terms, guiding you step by step through the process that you need to take. But in a nutshell, it's an application form that you get on our website that you fill out, that you send in. We will accept the application, and you'll make a deposit, and we'll issue you with the relevant certificates that you need to claim your tax deduction and to prove your ownership of the shares.
And like you said, the current investment window is open until the end of August, you said?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, so I think anyone who is interested in getting that 100,000 Rand pick it in, there is a little bit of a time limit, seeing that we are where we are, but everything is there online. Now, Johannes, I've seen there's obviously a lot of passion when you talk about this, and it's something you studied, you spent a lot of time on. What excites you the most about 12J, the whole platform?
I think, look, my background is property, essentially. So for me, it's a very let me phrase it like this. The main reasons I like property so much is, number one, the security it provides, and number two, the leverage that you can get through bank finance. Now, to get another tax break on top of that, and to further leverage your investment, is just, I think that's a very uncommon thing. I don't know anything else that compares to that. But that's me. I love property, and something that's extremely interesting that I've learned since we've started this business is the type of yield you can actually achieve by going the hotel route rather than the traditional long-term rental route. I've learned how dynamic property can actually be, and by putting in a little bit of extra effort into units, something simple, a nice piece of artwork, not having your managers taking the photos themselves, getting professional photographers in, little things like that. I mean, that makes the world of difference, especially on a booking platform. something like Airbnb, where guys have got a lot of options. Finding those couple of things that makes your units stand out really allows you, I think, number one, to obviously get your occupancy levels up, and number two, to push your pricing. And yeah, I've found that the yields that you can achieve through running your units as a hotel apartment rather than a traditional type of property is extremely exciting. That's but that's for me personally. But I think any investor minded person or investment minded person, the fact that you can get the taxman to subsidize your investment, I mean, that's for me just amazing, to be honest.
And that'll get anyone's tongue wagging.
Look, it got me very excited. I mean, I myself am invested in 12J. I mean, to me, it makes sense. I prefer to have cash flow back to me at the end of the day rather than paying it out to a place where I'm never going to see it again, and where I might be uncertain whether I'm actually ever going to see the roads and the hospitals that were supposed to be built with it.
Exactly. And I mean, it shows you're practicing what you preach, and you believe in your product, and that is why you also invest. Now, before we run out of time, I've got one last question to ask. The 12J system is due for review in 2021. So what are your thoughts on government extending the system for another extended period?
Okay, this what I'm going to say is my personal view. Like I'm quite close to the inner circle in the industry, so I know what all the lobby groups are doing and so on. And the trend the last few years have been that the legislators have really tried to bring in legislation that curbs misuse of the structure. So the way I see it, the fact that they go through that, and you can see that there's proper time and effort being spent on regulating this industry, that tells me personally that I think they've got a longer term view for it. I might be completely off. It might be that they decide, I think it's the 21st of June 2021, to close up the industry. But obviously, I think that puts a bit more of urgency on it, actually. I mean, obviously, everybody who's in before that time are in. You're not going to have your tax breaks reversed and things like that. So, I mean, there's still, as a minimum, there is still time till June 2021 to get invested in the sector and to get involved. The guys that are in, and we'll see whether guys will have an opportunity after the 21st of June 2021 to further partake in the industry. But yeah, my personal view is I think they will extend it. I think especially something like COVID that has knocked our economy back significantly. I think our country desperately needs structures like this because it incentivizes, investment back into our own economy. A lot of that is money that probably would have been taken overseas otherwise, or if were put to place in more established businesses like listed companies, for example. And we all know it's the SME sector that creates the most movement in the economy, that creates the most jobs, and widens the tax base for SARS for the long view. So I believe they'll extend it.
Fantastic. Johannes, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. For those who did tune in, we are going to be hosting this chat every single Wednesday at 1 p.m. with a different expert and a different sector of business every week. So please feel free to join us and to ask your questions. Let this become about, a two-way communication between us. Find out what you want to know about the industry. This video will also be available on YouTube for you to share with any friends or colleagues who may have been looking for investment opportunities but couldn't join us today. Now, final thoughts, Johannes, for those wishing to get into contact with you to get more information about 12J investments, how can they do that?
Okay, so on the website, I think that's the best point of call to start. Otherwise, they can contact us at our offices. It's info@destinataholdings.com. If you wouldn't mind, if it's possible, if you guys can share that in the text below the video, that'll be great. You know, or we're reachable by telephone 021-851-3590.
Fantastic. There we have it, ladies and gents. And if you liked what you heard today and you're interested in getting more information or finding out a little bit more about the Wealth Masters Club, visit www.wealthmastersclub.com. And on the homepage, on the left-hand side, you'll see a little box with a link to book for the next full day webinar, which is on the 5th of September. Now, do yourselves a favor, go and register. Over 100,000 people have already attended these webinars before, be it in person or online, and they have learned how to create wealth through property, trusts, and precious metals. Kurt and Tony are the experts there, and they will take you through everything you need to know and completely open your mind to a whole new world. And I promise you, you don't want to miss it. I was there at the last one, and just a little bit of an inside scoop. In the last webinar, they gave away gifts and prizes to the value of over 20,000 Rand, just for the people being there, asking a simple question or just random draws. So I'm sure you don't miss out. Also, please like and subscribe to the Wealth Masters TV YouTube channel and click on the bell icon that you will be notified next time we have an upcoming chat, because you don't want to miss a thing. Johannes, thank you very much for your time and your knowledge, and we look forward to chatting you again in the near future. Goodbye, everybody.
Thanks, Damien. I appreciate it. Thanks.